Welcome back to the podcast with Tom Ward, and we're talking all about profitability with branch managers, mortgage companies. It's interesting, Tom. We've had a lot of conversations just even yesterday, over the last few days, the last few weeks, and a lot of consistency in these conversations. So it's going to be part of our topic today. We're going to talk about why LOs stay or why loan officers leave. And there's an in-depth portion of this to kind of look into it, intellectually and figure this thing out. It's not a big change from what it is in other industries, but to dissect it here is important because we're having these conversations. It's a pulse in the market right now. I know you prepared for some of this, Tom, and I know we have some slides that we're going to show. So if you're listening, we have this in a video, format as well that's on YouTube. You can always watch there. But Tom, why LOs stay or why they leave? Can we start with, maybe the company's perspective, however you want to approach this, What's your thoughts on this? What are you hearing out there in the market right now?
Well, first of all, Majestic, I was fortunate enough to be able to have, my average tenure, even bringing kids in from college, was 5.7 years, right? And my top loan officers were with me a long time, and it was a constant battle. I chose the value side of the fork in the road, right? If I'm not going to pay them the absolute greatest comp plan, and I chose the value road, pay them a fair comp plan, but provide them a whole lot of value, that's what we did. That was our choosing of the business model. So let's talk about the company perspective. These are just two different perspectives. I'm not saying which one is right and which one's wrong. I just wanted to be able to shed the light on what the company thinks, right? And this is not, I'm going to be a little bit facetious in some of the things I'm going to say, but, and these aren't arrogant approaches by either side, but sometimes my caveat here is that it may come across the way I'm saying it as the company's being very arrogant or the LOs being very arrogant. I just want to point out, the thought process. So this is just through the company's, the company's lens. And it becomes, we started the company, it took a lot of capital for us to be able to get the net worth requirements. It took a lot, we had to be able to get licensed in all states. There's bonds required, and we had to get our agency approvals, that being HUD and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we provide the underwriting, and we've got the warehouse lines and all the things that the company does. And now, depending upon the company, perspective of this is that you could have this will apply to a standard retail operation, a standard P&L branch where the company's doing part of the work and they're sweeping money off the top. I call that a tax. So it applies to everything. And I think I'll apply to several other industries as well here at the end. But if there's no company, I often wanted to just start a presentation to a group. If I'm hired to speak as an LO, I said, well, what happened if there was no mortgage companies in the business? That all mortgage companies just vanished. What would happen? Well, there'd be no place for an originator to originate. So no LO is needed to originate if there's no company. The vision of this from the comp side is that the company says, listen, it's because of us, we have a company, we're going to pay you a portion of the revenue to originate. And that's how the company thinks, right? They just look at this and see, okay, that's their perspective. Now, the loan officer has a completely different perspective. And then I'll talk about what I think is where the rubber meets the road in most organizations. So as I go to the loan officer's perspective, they're going to say, it's my relationships with my realtors. If you have a realtor-centric program, it's my database. It's my knowledge. I'm very good at putting a deal together. It's because of me that my relationship that we even have a loan. Without us as originators, the company would have no loans to underwrite and process and close and take on a warehouse line. So without us, there is no company. Right. And we bring in the revenue to the company, and then they tax us by taking a piece of the revenue. So let's just use a standard retail model. Let's pretend that your rate sheet is set up for 275 basis points as a load on there. And let's just say you pay the loan officer 125 of that 275. The loan officer views that 150 basis points as a tax. And the company views it, as we just said, they view it differently. So now let's look at this together, and we start to realize it's like, okay, why did they leave, Tom? Interesting. I think I'll share this in a slide. Yeah, so here they are side by side. So you can just see that the company's perspective and the loan officer's perspective, and you can kind of look at these two. They stay when the value provided is equal to or greater than the tax that's charged. So the vision from the loan officer side is like, you're taxing me, and I'll stay if the value you're providing is equal to or greater than the tax. If we look at the next slide, they leave when the value provided is less than a tax charge. I know that's simplicity, but in reality, that's what's happening. And I think you just got to look at this from a 35,000-foot view and realize that that's why they leave. I did an interview. Let's see if this is on the next slide or not. Yeah, I did an interview. It was a Lenders One task that I did on behalf of Lenders One. And I interviewed 69 loan officers. Now, when I did that, all I wanted to know was why they left. And ultimately, I didn't want to know where they left, if they left from Wells Fargo or XYZ Mortgage or Joe Schmo Mortgage Broker. I didn't want to know why they left. I started the presentation. Matter of fact, I recorded every one of them. I did them personally. And I just asked the question, I said, why did you leave XYZ? And I don't really care if it was XYZ or Wells Fargo. It didn't matter to me. The interesting thing for me was only 2 left for money and for a higher split. So 67 people left for a variety of other reasons. Back then when I did it, it was part of the problem was you weren't being able to get loans closed. So the company couldn't get loans closed. Well, it doesn't do me any good as a loan officer if I bring in loans and they can't get closed, or the closing's delayed, or it's not funded at the table because the warehouse lines were full, whatever. So companies can't get my loans closed. So the tax charge included high quality ops. So when I say that, I say high quality ops. You've got to be able to, if you're choosing the value road, you've got to provide value. I don't care if it's a restaurant, a mortgage company, a real estate agency. At the end of the day, if you're choosing the value road, you've got to be able to provide high quality. I can go to, there's no such thing as Sizzler anymore. I don't think, maybe there's 1 or 2 left in California, but I could go to Sizzler and get a steak, or I could go to Ruth Chris and get a steak. If the steak that Ruth Chris is providing is like the steak that's provided by Sizzler, that's going to be an issue. So we've got to be able to make sure that, nobody spills steak juice on my shoulder when the guy's walking by at Ruth Chris. You've got to be able to make sure that it's done right. At Sizzler, so I was a little bit off. I know you ordered it medium rare, but it's medium well, so deal with it, right? So I think that's a difference in any walk of life. It doesn't have to be the mortgage business, but it's in any walk of life. In the pricing, what I'm seeing today in the market is that pricing has become non-competitive. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Obviously, we're doing the Save My Branch program, which is branch profitability, and we're really putting a full court press on how we can help branches. And we've limited this just to a monthly fee, and but when we're having conversations with potential candidates to become members of our program, oftentimes we find that they're leaving XYZ and they're either going to go start their own brokerage, they're going to go back into the broker arena, or they're going to leave and they're going to go and start their own mortgage banker operation. And most of the time, it's because their pricing has become competitive. Now, that could mean that legacy costs are too high. Sometimes you've got a large organization that have got people around. You see it sometimes in the car industry where General Motors, I think 55% of their budget goes to legacy costs of retirement for people and all those things that go along with that of being a company that's been around a while. So the legacy costs are too high. And ultimately that's passed on to the branch, passed on to the tax that the loan officer is being charged. Whatever that is, it's just too high. And the loan officer, the balancing act here becomes, how do I provide a competitive rate on the rates on the market in the marketplace. And I mean, when I say competitive, it's not the lowest. Nobody really has the lowest interest rate. So I've got to be competitive on the street. I've got to be able to pay my loan officers a fair wage so the bandits don't come by and steal them from me. I've got to provide a great operations team in order to get that loan out the back door, because it doesn't make any sense if I bring it in the front door and the back door can't get it out. It's worthless, because now I got to go put my tail between my legs and go to the real estate agent and say, just want to let you know we're not closing the Smith loan this week. It's going to have to wait till next week. And I think that's the struggle, that everybody has. And then you've got to be able to have enough profit in there to satisfy your investors, whether that's you solely as an entrepreneur, or you've got a couple of principals that are out there, or you're a publicly traded company, that you've got to be able to provide that. So the balancing act becomes, how do you balance all four of those things to be able to make sure it's there? Now, I've seen companies get non-competitive because maybe we've had some losses accrue and I've got to get even over the bad times. I had a branch leave. They might say I had a branch leave and they stuck me with a $200,000 negative loss, right? So I got to eat that. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to make up for it by just ratcheting up the rate sheet. And that doesn't have to be much. It could be 10, 20, 30 basis points, but sooner or later that starts to tell its toll, especially when everybody's out there trying to get as many loans as possible in the door. So the trick here becomes, how do you get them in the door without really being non-competitive in the rate sheet? I think there's also a part that companies have a tendency of stroking the ego of a person who can sell a higher interest rate in the market. Come on, John, you can do it. You're really good. You can sell the value, sell the value, sell the value. Well, sooner or later, you need to be close, right? I'm not sure if that's an eighth or a quarter in rate, but if you're a half a point out in interest rate, you're probably going to be in a little trouble with that. I've also seen companies get really greedy because they've had a situation come up personally where they're getting ready to retire, or I got to put my kids through USC, so I'm not making enough money here at the profit level, so therefore we've got to be able to make it up. I've also seen there to be heavy costs associated with organizations. They paid $100,000 signing bonus for underwriters, and now I got to make that up. I've also seen companies have a tendency of not making it a level playing field for loan officers. So if Steve's branch down the street can't make the rate sheet, and we're continually taking losses on Steve's branch, we just put across the board, we increase the tax. Well, that penalizes the good people who are providing great service, not completely complaining about everything that goes on, and they're a really good branch. But the problem is, the bad are making the good suffer. So I've seen that as well. So I think it's something that you need to have a pulse on that's happening in today's market. I don't think it's something that really, I think it's something that you've got to pay attention to, because I think sometimes we have a tendency, I guess it's kind of like the boy that cried wolf. There's a wolf, there's a wolf, there's a wolf. And people are constantly complaining, our rates are too high, rates are too high, rates are too high. And they weren't really. And then all of a sudden they become too high. Now it becomes, I don't listen to them anymore because I've been lulled to sleep by, the wolf is coming, the wolf is coming, the wolf is coming. Then really the wolf comes and nobody's ready for it. So I think that's where we start to realize that.
I have a question on that. So before we go to the next point, and it's the mindset of the branch manager, and you kind of started alluding to it there. How does the branch manager stay in front of these challenges? And maybe you could take it in two parts. Stay in front of the loan officer feeling that they're getting taxed, quote unquote, taxed too much. And then how do they stay in front of the frustration that maybe the LO might have because their price is non-competitive? How does the branch manager manage that in anticipating, keeping talented people around?
Well, first of all, I mean, turnover is a killer. I mean, as far as if you don't, I felt as though somebody and to get them into the culture and feel them out, and we can see where they're coming from. Um, I don't think we put enough stock in that. If you've got a constant revolving door where the loan officers are constantly leaving and you're 10 years a year, 9 months, something down the road, you know you've got an issue. But when I was in my YPO group, which I've talked about that here for a while now, one of the things that happens is that sometimes companies shortchange themselves. Sometimes it's a communication issue, being able to say, these are all the things that we provide. First of all, you're an employer. It's an employer-employee relationship, right? So if you're a straight up retail environment, I'm matching your FICA. So I'm paying 7.5%. It's coming out of my side of the equation. It's not coming out of your side. When you become self-employed or you become a P&L branch, that whole 15% rolls up underneath your branch. So I think it's important for the company to be able to say, these are all the things that we provide for the tax. So I think it's important that the company shares that. You see it with a lot of some of the benefits consulting companies in that YPO group. I saw guys who talk about it all the time, and they'd have a benefit consulting group that would put together a small brochure that would go along inside the olden days when you get a paycheck in an envelope. It would be included in that, or it would be in a banner. These are all the things that we provided for that. I think you've got to be able to flush out. Going back to your question, Tim, you've got to be able to flush out. So I think that the word transparency is the right word to use as long as it's true. Oftentimes, I think communication is real important. Whether that's a brand company to a brand to an LO, or a company to a branch who's running a P&L, I think it's important to communicate. And I know that ever since LO Comp had changed, everything has shifted. When I had, hopefully I don't get hit by lightning when I say these words, back in the day before LO Comp, there was something we called net branches. We would be completely transparent. We would show them how much money we're sweeping off of the P&L for it, and it would be in the agreement. We'd basically say we're charging 40 basis points and $695 is what our tax was to the branch, and then they got 100% of the profit with what was there. Now, whether 40 is right today, I'm not sure I could make it on 40 today, but it's something. So I think it's a matter of, listen, with all the technology that's out there today, the loan officer typically can re-engineer the rate sheet. They can reverse engineer it, coming backwards and saying, I can kind of tell you what it's like. And the struggle that you have is that all the recruiters are out there saying, come to work at XYZ, we'll pay you more. Well, we all know that, somebody who's paying you more usually reflects in the rate sheet unless the company is there. So I think it's a matter of communicating to that. When we show a branch the 8 KPIs, the 8 key performance indicators, it becomes clearer. As a matter of fact, one of our members took the whole mindset of transparency and showed a loan officer who was discounting the rate sheet. This wasn't necessarily, this is the opposite way. Company wasn't making it because the loan officer was discounting it, and ultimately showed him and said, listen, we can't make any money. I can't even pay the bills with what you're bringing in. She showed him the top business blood pressure number. She showed him the bottom business blood pressure number. Then she showed him LO Comp. And every time with you, Joe, that we always show negative with you. And now either we got to change something or I got to move on here. And Joe was sensitive to it. And Joe says, listen, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize what an effect that would have on the whole organization, and changed their ways. So that communication was a huge help throughout the process. So I think as we look at this and we see it, I think it's important to look at it. Hopefully that answered your question, Tim.
It does. And I think it's the idea of how does the branch manager stay equipped and stay in front of these challenges. And that's it. And that story, I heard that as well. It's that she had the knowledge to be able to be transparent with her LO to say, hey, listen, we're on the same team here. Let me show you what's going on with your pricing. It's not good overall over a long period of time for what we're all trying to do here. And that's keep the lights on and make a profit. And I think the transparency, it's equipping them, right? So I'll speak for the system because, and this is not a commercial, but I have to speak because it's true. This is a tool that equips the branch manager to be able to stay in front of those challenges. They leave, they stay. Why? Well, if you can be transparent and have the tools as a branch manager or as a business owner to be able to speak to that, know it, and be empowered, well, then you're one step ahead. We'll conclude this conversation in the next podcast. So please tune in. Thanks for joining us today.